Hello, hello. Everyone's joining. Hello. We'll give everyone a second to kind of come in. Hello. Spotlight you. And then we're going to spotlight me. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming today. My name is Mel. I'm the Director of Operations on the Farmers Footprint US team. And I'm really excited for this conversation. Today, we have Blair Beattie, who is the Executive Director of the Farmers Footprint Australia team. Blair, do you want to take a second to introduce yourself?
Sure, love to. Thank you for all joining on for what is a bit of a momentous morning for the US and Australian teams. It's beautiful to see all your faces. I'm the executive director down under. We have a small team and super excited to have a chat to you today about our first kind of real collaboration, international collaboration, where we can combine forces and hopefully create some magic together. So yeah, thanks again for joining us all, and look forward to unpacking and having a beautiful conversation.
Yeah, definitely. So this one's been a long time coming, Blair. I joined the team over 2.5 years ago at this point, and the glyphosate conversation at the time it was called the No Glyphosate campaign was alive at that time in the team. So this has been a conversation that the farmers footprint ecosystem, global ecosystem, has been focused on for quite some time. Pesticide use, chemical use in general in the food industry is a huge part of monocrop agriculture and the impact it has on the environment and our health as humans. But Blair, you've been on the team since the original campaign all the way through now. And you've also had the pleasure of getting to host the podcast. So you've been able to sit in on all of these conversations with all of our guests. But so, really, to start off this conversation, I'm curious if you can kind of take us back and bring us into the present of like, why glyphosate? Why this conversation? Why now?
Yeah, strap in. So to give some context to that, like this story is kind of how I got into Farmers Footprint in the first place. I've always been rooted in some sort of culture, agriculture, permaculture, horticulture, and I've been a big activist against using these synthetic chemicals in our food systems for a long time. And then I heard a podcast by actually our first guest and one of our founders, Zach Bush, a few years ago with Rich Roll, and he spoke to it so eloquently. I was and resonated so much with where I was in my life and how what I wanted to bring into the world via food systems and agriculture that I reached out, and here I am. It just feels synchronic that here we are now finally birthing this conversation around, it's really around agrochemicals in our food system, which are overutilized and we're somewhat reliant on because of what we've constructed as a food system. But we're really focusing on glyphosate because as our poster child, because it is the one that's most widely used. It's also the one that is most well known. I think we all probably have had a sneaky bottle of Roundup in our sheds that we may have used on our walkways or for some reason in our own home gardens, and that's reflected across our entire food system. And it's utilized, like I think one of our guests quoted that it's been utilized more so than any all the other pesticides combined, which floored me. It's like, wow. So this overuse has certainly come to the detriment of our landscape function. This molecule is water soluble, so it kind of gets everywhere. It gets sprayed, it ends up in the soil, it affects the biology in our soil, it then moves through into the water tables, our groundwater, into our waterways. And as we know, there's water cycles, there's carbon cycles, there's nutrient cycles. It ends up in our air and it ends up everywhere. And I think that's what we're seeing today with this. We do have a challenge, a health challenge across all westernized countries, all countries that essentially have utilized this conventional industrial model of farming. The byproducts of that is that our health has declined, our biology has been disrupted because of these chemicals, and especially this one that we're focusing on, as well as our biodiversity. And this campaign that we've brought together, or these conversations that we've brought together over the coming weeks, is really just to synthesize, distill that reality, create awareness, because so many people are still kind of unaware. They might have heard about it, but they don't really know what it is and what it does. So we paint that picture, we build that framework so people get a really deep understanding of what's happening, because we're speaking to people which have lived this story for years, decades, and we get to bring them together in a container and hold a big conversation, and then we point towards, well, what's possible if we want to stop using these things, which I highly recommend we do, and so does our team, and we're very passionate about that. We can't really have a conversation without offering some solutions, some pathways towards healing, whether that be within our food systems or on our landscapes or our schoolyards or our local municipalities where this chemical is still used in abundance. So we unpack that from an Indigenous perspective. We have school campuses, and we have so much possibility when we come together. So in a sense, this is what this container is. It's an opportunity for people to get informed, become aware, and then realize the possibility of a post-agrochemical future.
100%. Yeah, a couple of things stand out for me there when you're talking about it. So one thing to just for the listeners here to give context of why glyphosate. So glyphosate is the most widely used herbicide, also pesticide, in the world. 8 billion kilograms have been used. But that's not just only in agriculture. There's been 21 million pounds used in the landscaping realm. That was the figure I just read recently. So we mentioned Roundup. Roundup, you can find it in Home Depot. Glyphosate's the active ingredient in Roundup. It makes up about 52% of the chemical of Roundup. And then the other 50% is a bunch of stuff that just makes it better at penetrating your tissues. And so it's not just an agricultural issue. It is actually very present in parks, schools, your neighborhood. People are using it all over the place. So it's very prevalent in the system. And then another thing to really highlight of why glyphosate and why now is, and we talk about this, we unpack it a lot in the podcast, is the amount of like bureaucratic structure, I think is what I'm going to use to describe it, that supports the system that we have now is unreal. So the same company, Monsanto, now known as Bayer, who holds the patent, the original patent for genetically modified crops, and genetically modified crops were created to be Roundup ready crops so that you could spray glyphosate on them, were founded in 1996. That's the same company that sells and holds the patent for Roundup. So, and they're the same company that now does a lot, millions of dollars in lobbying in the United States and globally to get GMO seeds adopted, to use glyphosate. So a lot of times when we're having this conversation, an initial reaction can be, why are farmers doing this? Like, why would, if they know that the impact it can have on the environment and our health, why would they do this? Just stop spraying. I think a big part of this conversation, and one big takeaway that we're really hoping from the Farmers Footprint team, is to underscore that this is not a farmer's being the bad guy in this story. That is like the last thing that we want to position. We always talk on our team is there was this farmer wearing a shirt that was like, I'm a farmer and I'm not trying to kill you. That is like the core purpose here. There is a very big system that exists stemming out of the United States and then being pervasive to the globe that are putting farmers in this position where they literally are stuck in this pesticide treadmill. And we get into it a lot throughout this podcast, but I think that that's something really interesting to kind of like underscore in this conversation. And it takes 11 episodes to really unpack it because it is complicated and nuanced, and there's a lot of perspectives and there's a lot of science that's out there. And we talk about this a lot too. There's so much science that exists in this, and there's so much science that supports the use of glyphosate, and says it's perfectly safe. And then there's a lot of science that says you should not and it's not safe. And that can be confusing. And I believe it is confusing on purpose to make it less clear. So the goal of this conversation isn't necessarily to say, this is the right way or this is the solution. It's to share a variety of perspectives that is exploring the nuance and depth of this issue in a way that's never been done before. There isn't, to our knowledge, a repertoire of this much diversity of perspectives and conversations in one container so that you can try and get a full understanding of this. Which actually kind of leads me to my next question. Podcast. Blair, you're our podcast host. You're great for it. You got the voice for it. Why did we choose to go for a podcast? This is the first podcast we've ever done in the Farmers Footprint ecosystem. We're kind of stepping into new territory. Do you want to reflect a little bit, Blair, on what that experience has been filming podcasts, and also why the team chose to shift into a completely new type of medium for storytelling?
It's a really good question. And I just want to, before I dive into that, I'd love to just reiterate that what you've just said. This is not a witch hunt on farmers. I spent 2 years traveling around Australia and had conversations with so many farmers that utilize agrochemicals to support their system. And there's so many of them that would like to shift away from that. But and people say that our food system's broken. Our food system's designed in a certain way to support profitability and productivity. And that is not the care for farmers or landscape or consumers. And it's built this way, and it's a really hard thing to transition out of. So we want to bring farmers on this journey as well of discovery and possibility, and they're fully invited. And this is not, we don't pass judgment on anyone that's has utilized or is utilizing chemicals in their system, because there's a playbook that if you're a farmer, you kind of have to play by. Otherwise, you're a rogue, and you face challenges and risk. So this monocropping industrial system is built this way, and for someone to shift, it takes courage and bravery, and also a lot of support, ingenuity, and the realization of something more beautiful. So that's kind of the sense what I really want to bring home, in that this is an invitation for everyone, farmers, consumers, stakeholders in the food industry, to really become fully present and aware to what is going on and the byproducts that we're seeing about our actions and our behaviors. So why a podcast? Look, I don't know how I ended up being a host.
It's your voice, Blair. You got it. You're the perfect podcast host.
I said to our team that I've got a really good head for radio, so let's make sure it's not videoed. But of
And
course, it was
it
videoed.
is video.
Um, for us, it was just stepping into a new medium, and the ability to reach a new audience. Podcasting is such a wow. There's so much available. There's so much knowledge available right now. Education, conversation. It just seemed as if it was time for us to grow and evolve, and sort of shift a gear and pull some more levers into building an audience, because this essentially is possible. It might be the most important conversation that we have. It certainly feels like one of the most important conversations we should be having. Everyone should be having. And if we're going to reach the, outside our current audience, we need to be investing time and energy into platforms that can give us that reach. And podcasting seemed to be a great way to do that. And also holding a container where we can have various people, various perspectives, speak to them that are, on other sides of the world. It just seemed the right way. And, we built the skill set, and here we are. It's super exciting to be launching our first episode today. And we really received so much gratitude and support and acknowledgement for bringing this to life. Every person that I sat in front of was so thrilled that this is happening. that there's something being built where there's a diversity of perspectives in the one room, and it can be an offering to people to awaken and to understand and realize. We did, you know, we did invite people that probably sit in an alternate perspective to this conversation, meaning we invited Bayer, but they didn't want to come. It would have
Surprise.
been a great conversation. And the nuance around this topic is there's some complexity. And if we're to speak to one or two people, we're not giving you, a listener, the full spectrum understanding and opportunity that you all deserve. Because discernment's key. Knowledge is power. And here we are. I'm just super excited to get this underway. It's been a privilege. I've been very humbled to sit in front of people that have spent, they haven't just been working in this space, they've been living this space for years. They've
Hmm.
written books, they've been talking about it, they've been, as one said, he's been ringing the bell on this topic forever. And it's been his life work and his legacy. So to give them a platform, to give them an opportunity to share some of their findings, it feels right for our time, and it certainly feels wonderful for our organization to come together. We've always been in comms, US, Australia, and we've also got a fledgling organization hoping to flower soon in New Zealand. It feels great for us to be able to do something together. And the reason this was kind of the topic is because this is an international conversation. No one
Hmm.
escapes. It doesn't matter if you do as much as you can to avoid these agrochemicals. And again, glyphosate's one of a suite of
Any.
chemicals that we utilize. And some have far greater horrible byproducts than glyphosate, but glyphosate is the one that's used most. Um, I think for us as an organization, it was really part of our evolution to bring something to the world. And this in itself is a precursor to something bigger and more beautiful that we hope to release next year, that we can unpack a little bit today, or maybe we can just set up a whole new webinar to talk about that one, and
Yeah,
focus on what's
100%.
present at the moment.
While you were talking, Blair, actually, Shannon added a note into a comment into the chat that I wanted to address, and it's about the science, the science of glyphosate. Let's get into that for a second because you make a point, Shannon, about whether American Cancer Society acknowledges the carcinogen nature of glyphosate, and that is, I think, probably one of the reasons that this conversation is so. Debated, I think is the word I'm trying to say, or there's a lot of push and pull tension, is because the science is vast and contradictory, which if you're in the science realm at all, that is often what happens in science. If you are studying um, a topic, any topic really, you usually can find a suite of studies that support your thesis and a suite of studies that don't support your thesis. It's what makes science so hard. So a big part of this research and this project that we've been working on is including a variety of people. So quickly, we started this podcast series having 6 guests. We had originally, it was a 6 episode series, and every week we met twice a week, and every time we met, it felt like there was like, I think we need another person's perspective, and I think we need another person's perspective, and it quickly became a 11 episode series. In our meeting yesterday, we were talking about adding a 12. So there's so many. Maybe we will see. Stay tuned on that. Um, but there's so much um, there's so much science that exists out there, and it can get really muddy and difficult to understand. So, in part of this process of bringing in these speakers and sharing their perspectives, we wanted to take a deeper dive into the literature. And that's been a part of something that I've been really working on the team in collaboration with the whole team, is what does the science say? And the science says a lot. It's spoiler alert. There's so much out there. One of the biggest ones you see is the IRAC, I believe is what it's called.
IARC, yeah,
IARC, yeah,
yeah.
World Health Organization. They listed that glyphosate was a probable carcinogen in 2015. And then they since rolled that back. And then there was a court ruling that said, nope, what their rollback was not scientifically sound. And then there was a court ruling that argued that court ruling. And so that's the experience that we're having here. There's a study that will come out, and then there will be a counter study and a counter study and a counter study. And it's very vast. And the speakers throughout the podcast speak to this quite a bit. But a big part of this is we have to acknowledge is the role that organizations and corporations have played in the development of the studies to say whether or not this is safe. There's so much stories and history that you can trace throughout of tampering with the skin of a cadaver so that it didn't have as much permeability, or a lab that had someone from Monsanto who was working at the lab, got charged for fraudulent of 200 studies, got sent to prison, and then when he got out of prison, went back to work for Monsanto. These are stories that exist throughout time. And it makes it very difficult to understand, like, okay, this study says that glyphosate is completely safe. You could drink it. It's so safe you could drink it. Why would someone say that? And there is a very long history of meddling in those places. And again, we're not here to necessarily say like this is truth and this is not, because to be honest, it's very hard to identify what is the clear truth here. What I can say is each episode will include a document that break with timestamps of all of the comments of, like, someone says a stat or a references a story, there will be a document that has the timestamp and a little bit more context on that. What is the study they're talking about? What is the instance they're talking about? Where's the link? So that people can have more clarity into what people are talking about, and then make decisions on their own. I can also say, as someone who's been very much working on this document, the body of literature that exists to support the negative effects of glyphosate is outstanding. It's massive. There's so much and I could sit here for 2 hours. This could be a podcast episode between me and Blair of me just like talking about all this literature. I'm going to save it for the actual podcast and not go into full monologue. But just to give a little bit of context on why we don't see the health effects so publicly advertised, that's a huge part of the reason. And it's something that we do get into quite a bit throughout the entire podcast. So I recommend tuning in for some crazy stories. And then if you want to dive deeper, we're producing a resource guide. So the resource guide is going to be a little bit more digestible, covering glyphosate in its 10 pages, digestible, downloadable, something you can download, share with your friends, email someone, a little bit more just like once over. If you've just read this, if you've never heard of glyphosate before, you'll be able to have at least a fairly solid understanding of what it is, where it started, the impact it has on human and environmental health, its connection with GMOs, and how the science is conflicting. And then we have this more in-depth resource guide, which is a lot more dense, goes into the science, has the sources, all of that stuff. But just saw that link come through. Blair and I were going to talk about the science at some point throughout this conversation, so I figured I'd just jump right into it right off the bat. But
I want to
go ahead, Blair.
if I may, Mel, I would just want to acknowledge the body of work that you have created in that citation document. Because as I was talking to the people and they were reeling off all these studies and things, in the back of my mind, I'm just going, oh my God, Mel's going to be really busy. And as a result, she has been, but it is a really powerful piece of work. It allows us to correlate and represent our perspective and these people's perspective with some really hard science. And when you take a zoom out and look at agriculture, look at science, we always have dichotomies. In Australia here, we still have, a farmers federation that has a one-page promotional piece on their website around the use of glyphosate as part of farming methodology. Um, it just so happens that these federations are supported and funded by some of the people that might make these products as well. So we dive into, so we sort of lift the veil on the behavior of what I would call large global cartels that sort of control how we grow food, what we eat, when we eat, how we behave on Earth. And we have incredible in-depth discussions with the people that have taken them to court and won.
On
And
that,
it's
want to get specific.
mind-blowing at the behavior and the lengths that these people will go to adjust the science or to create the story or the spin which supports their end goal of essentially profit.
Do you want to get specific, Blair, into like a little bit more thought of who is featured on this podcast and um, what were we thinking about as we were going through creating this
Yeah.
list of speakers? Since it is, we could, like I said, it's 11 episodes now. There's a potential 12th, like sitting there. We're kind of like, oh, do we do it? And we probably could add another like 30. So if you want to just, we can back and forth with it. But what was the team
Mm.
going through as we were narrowing it down and kind of like selecting the lineup for this 11 episode series that we have launching today?
Mm. It took some time to really distill what it is that we want to bring to life and what conversations are really appropriate for someone that's new to this topic as well. So we had to explain what glyphosate was, so someone could speak to that. We then wanted to talk about, well, what does it do and how is it used? And why is it used? And how has it become the most widespread pesticide worldwide? And we can talk about that if we have time, because that's an interesting one when people don't know what desiccation is. But
Mm-hmm.
I'll hold that thought for a moment.
Pin.
And then we wanted to talk about, well, the byproducts of using this ubiquitous chemical, which is something I say a lot. Uh, what does it do to our human biology? What does it do to our landscape, our waterways? So we invite that conversation and have, there's Zach, who I'm sure you all know, is on our release today and dives into a lot about the actual this molecule. Where does the history of it? Where does it come from, and why are we using it? We then get a farmer's perspective, which I loved having a conversation. There's a fella called Will Harris that his his ranch is called White Oaks Pastures, and it's one of the most beautiful stories. And it's actually a case study for the world to see what happens when we move away and transition away from reliance on synthetic fertilizers and agrochemicals. He's not only reinvigorated his landscape, had his family come back to the ranch, he's reinvigorated and sort of re-enlivened his entire town as a result of the work he's doing. And that's kind of the diversity piece, right? If we bring back diversity, we need it within ourselves. We need it in our landscapes. So we unpack his story, which was challenging, but we get to see what's possible with him. We have Stephanie Seneff on, who's an MIT researcher, and she goes deep into the causative pathways and sort of joining the dots, as she says, into this chemical and the harm that it's caused and what that shows up as within our biological function. Um, yeah, Jeffrey Smith raves and raves about the connection between GMOs and glyphosate because they're embedded together, which is super interesting and something that people also need to
That's the
realize.
that's the most interesting part, actually. That one of the biggest things that I've learned from this series is I've always heard of GMOs, like the non-GMO project. We are partners with them through work, and I work at a nonprofit that works in food system reform, and I still was not fully aware that the intricate connection between GMOs and glyphosate use, like the GMOs were literally created so we could use more glyphosate. That was the actual purpose of them. They're Roundup Ready crops. That's why they were literally made. And there was this intention, and still is, to be honest, this intention to make all food genetically modified, and the impact that that has not only on our food sovereignty and our ability to save seeds, but also on the economics of farming, because you can't save the seed. You have to purchase new seeds every year. I mean, the GMO. It's episode 4 with Jeffrey Smith. That episode has stuck with me like quite a bit since I'm actively doing the citation guide for it also. So I'm actively, literally in the weeds of it, but it is crazy. That connection is incredibly crazy. GMOs and glyphosate. Sorry, Blair, I just totally interrupted you, but I wanted to underscore that one as like a huge, interesting takeaway that I've had from this series.
I invite you to interrupt me whenever something surfaces and you get passionate because I love it. Um, so when we looked at sort of an overview of the conversations we want to have, we want to know what it is, why it's used, what does it do to the human biology, what does it do to our environment, what happens from our policy perspective on how do we get here? Why is this stuff still being, well, why do we have legislators that are still allowing this to be used when there is this conversation, there is this dichotomy of whether it causes harm or whether it doesn't cause harm. If it is at all, or if there's any suspicion of it all causing harm, it should be taken off, which we should be finding other solutions. That's not happening. Why? So we unpack that. We invite the legal side of it. We have Brent, who took Monsanto to court in 2018 and won the first case against Monsanto for in support of Dwayne Lee Johnson that had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which has then given the whole of the US permission to do the same. And that what strikes me that comes up in this conversation is that there's been something billions of dollars that have been that this company has had to give over to people that have taken to the court for the harm that they have suffered because of exposure to the chemical. But what's come up through this, which I find just so unbelievably shocking, is that these companies are pitching for a policy which will indemnify them from any legal action should someone else say that your chemicals are causing me harm. So this is
And they're
Bayer,
succeeding.
this is Syngenta. They're all saying this needs to stop. I don't want to be taken to court anymore. Government, you need to come in and write a policy that protects me.
In Georgia and North Dakota, those policies have passed. I'm pretty sure this one's tricky because they're like a bunch of states are actively in it. I think there's 9 other states that they're working on right now. But yeah, North Dakota and Georgia in 2025 successfully passed legislation protecting them of immunity for cancer rates.
I mean, uh, I think that gives us a really clear indication of what goes on in the back rooms. Like, how can that happen? We've already been through the judicial system. It has been proven to cause harm. It has been proven that exposure to it can cause cancer.
Mm-hmm.
So why is it that we still, when these bodies, these government bodies are meant to be there to protect us from harm? And I just don't see that happening. It's not happening here in Australia, where we have these legislative bodies having a sort of revolving door between big ag, big pharma, and the people that make our policies. That's been going on for some time. So we get to awaken that and bring that to a conversation because it gets I get pretty impassioned, as you can hear
Don't we all?
when when we talk about these topics, because I know the harm that's happened. So then after all that framework, we all thought as a team, okay, so this can feel pretty heavy and this could be pretty challenging. And it would be remiss of us not to start talking about what's possible. What do we do? How can we activate as individuals? How can farms change their principles and protocols and individually and collectively? So we invite those conversations in. And that's really inspiring. Like we talk about an indigenous perspective around these chemicals that we use in our food system, which is something that I'd considered before, but not to the not with the beauty and the harmony that we get to unpack with Dr. Jessica Hutchins. She's a Māori um, food sovereignty activist, power woman, warrior woman, and she's so eloquent when she speaks to this. And it's just you just go, oh my God, yes, this is not in accordance with the way the planet wants to move, with the logos of the planet, of the cosmology or nature itself. Um, so yeah, there's another beautiful conversation. We get inspired by a young student activist that has now brought forth this organization, is changing um, the chemicals that they use on campus, moving away from synthetic chemicals to organics. It's called Rewild Your Campus, which is now caught on and moving across America. So we get to see what's possible, and that there is a possibility beyond this, because the stories that we've been told about we need these chemicals to feed the world are just not true. And Charles Benbrook, who's an amazing researcher, speaks to this really in deep terms, and he's the one that knows because he's been researching this. He's been a policymaker. He's seen both sides of the fence, and he illuminates a pathway of what's possible and what we need to do in our food systems to start coming back into harmony and start realizing our potential of nutrient dense food and healthy people. There's
100%.
probably a few more I've missed than you're thinking of them right
I
now,
think
Mel,
the
but
only ones you missed, we have Helena Norberg Hodge. She talks about regionalization of our food system and hoping, like, focusing, shifting from a globalized food system to a more regionalized food system. She's a beautiful matriarch as well. It just has beautiful, like, nurturing energy that speaks in a way that is like, wow, this is actually, we can do this. Because, like you said, Blair, like, this conversation is tough. Like, it especially so just for the listeners too, to frame it, the first half of the podcast is kind of, we've been working on this internally. It's not something we as much externally share, but the first few episodes of the series are very context setting. And so it can be a little heavy when you start talking about the really negative impacts that it's having, not only on our health, the gut microbiome, mitochondrial function, environmental function, the GMO, the bureaucracy there, the corruption in science, in the lobbying, all of those things. And then the second half of the podcast kind of takes a little bit more of a breath and focuses more on those ways forward. But there are ways forward, and that's something that we really want. If there are two take-home methods here, one, farmers are not the bad guy. They're not the demon in this story. And two, hope exists here. And while we do need to be aware of what we're going up against, because to have awareness is to know that change is possible. But awareness precedes change is kind of like our slogan of our entire nonprofit ecosystem for all of the work we do here, and specifically this campaign. But um, so there's hope can remain while still having all this information. Um, so to get I'm kind of reading this comment.
it's great from
You
Denise.
want to speak to it, Blair?
Sorry?
You want to speak to the comment?
No, it's a really good comment, and it's
Very
something
good
that
comment.
we're actively working toward at the moment. Like we have this now. We've done all the hard work. We've got the interviews, and there's so much that goes into these things. It's quite incredible. But here we are. We've got the first one out, so our energy and attention is fully on our network and the mycelial network coming into action. So this gets into the hands where it needs to go. Like we love speaking to an audience that nods their heads, but our ambition is to speak to people that haven't heard this before, don't know this. And Denise, I know you've just spoken to those people we want to get in front of. So we will be sending this to farmers federations, farmers cooperatives, um, people that have a network to then network to. That's our my mission here in Australia, and the same for our amazing amazing partners in the US will be doing the same, as getting advocates out there, getting this in front of as many people as possible, so we can build the energy required. Because this is not a new topic. This is a 20, 30-year-old topic, and we still have not seen what we would like to happen. And we've realized that the missing piece of this puzzle is mass awareness. Because once people know this stuff, you can't forget it. You can't unlearn it. And it is, and if we can make it activating and give people options of what's possible and how they can, mums with kids can start choosing differently, because they're understanding that what they're feeding them is probably possibly causing them harm. So our ambition is far and wide, and I'm looking forward to these next weeks as it starts to take over the airwaves and be a bigger conversation. It'll ignite conversations everywhere. This topic is pretty hot. Whenever we put something out there, it's always the one that sparks the most, the biggest flame, I guess. So yeah, I'm hearing that, and there's a sense of great urgency to get this word out there and create the energy required, so we can make the change that we know is possible and lead into our bigger campaign next year.
Yeah. One thing I want to add there, Blair, is so I would say there's two. I mean, we really want to get this conversation in front of as many faces as possible. I would say people who nod their heads, people who have no idea what we're talking about, and people who shake their heads and blanketly don't agree with us, which there is a very large group of people who just do not agree. And they're able to have that opinion, but I do believe if with the amount of information that we are presenting, I do think that there is a conversation that can be had here to potentially shift minds and perspectives. But I would argue too, so we need to get this conversation in front of farmers, so that they can better understand. A lot of farmers are somewhat aware of this conversation. It's a very big cultural conversation there as well. So you have to be tactical about how you go about that. And that's something that we're focusing on as the podcast is officially launching and we're rolling out the information. And then two, something that really stood out to me as I was listening to, particularly Will Harris is a big one, that when he was in his episode, consumers play, I think, just as much of a role as farmers do in the future that we want to see in our food system. Consumers, individual consumers, and the ways that they interact with their food system have so much power in a way that I don't think a lot of people necessarily know or realize. A lot of times whenever we're going to conferences or we're talking to farmers and there's a bunch of farmers in a room, and we're asking, how can we support you? How can we support regenerative farmers who are not regenerative and are hoping to maybe get there one day? And all the time, often what we're getting is we need consumers to be aware of the role that they play in shifting the market so that people can transition. I think there's a powerful quote that Will says specifically. It's like, it's not going to come from the government. It's not going to come from the corporations. It's not going to come from the universities. It's not going to come from the farmers, really. It's going to come from the consumers and the people who are demanding that something change in the food system and rally behind farmers and support them in their transition. Right now, the market of the farming, and I'm speaking very specifically, I'm in Austin, Texas. I know most about the US farming agricultural system, although I'm blessed to work on an international team. But the United States agricultural system is propped up by commodity crops and government subsidies. And to switch away from commodity crops and government subsidies is inherently risky and hard and culturally ostracizing and not an easy transition. And so farmers need to know that there will be people to buy their product, that the market exists for them. This is something that we get into a lot in the podcast. Again, I'm monologuing at this point, but I just want to emphasize that farmers play a huge role in this, and they will be a big part of this transition. And then consumers also play a huge part in this as well. And it's through connecting these two things that we'll actually be able to see the change that we want to see in the world. It's not gonna, no one's gonna come and save us. We have to save ourselves, is kind of the moral of that story. Blair, I see you reading a comment. I have not had the chance to read it. We have about 15 minutes left here. I did have one question, Blair. I do want to open it up to if anyone has some questions, but I wanted to leave one more thing for you, Blair. If you've obviously sat in the studio with all of our speakers over the last 2 months, I would say you were filming. Is there a specific conversation or moment that really stood out to you, or something that you're particularly excited for people to see and hear and get to experience?
That's a terrible question.
I asked you it yesterday and said you have 24 hours to think about it. So where did we land?
I know, and I realize I can't answer that because I think because I honestly have to say that in every conversation there was something that really resonated, that really struck a chord, whether it was a confirmation or whether it was something new or whether it was just the eloquence from a different perspective that allowed me to give greater understanding to this topic. There's mind-blowing moments when you talk about the corporate story, and there's so much beauty and resonance when we speak about the farmer and the indigenous story and the localization possibility. So I just couldn't find the one piece. In every conversation, there's something that just gives you hope or allows you to really embody and totally completely understand what needs to happen. It's like when we receive challenging information, we have a choice to do something with it. We either get angry or we transmute that into appropriate action and positive action. And that's what happens when I hear it. It's like, well, what am I going to do in response to what I'm hearing? I'm going to I'm going to share as much as I can with my community, with my friends. I'm going to activate them. I'm going to allow myself to be a vehicle of information, and that's the invitation for everyone that tunes in is what resonates, what strikes a chord. Use that as part of your toolkit to share this really important information with those that you love and those that you come in contact with, because we can all take part in this. We eat 3 times a day. I'm probably don't eat 3 times a day because I'm on one intermittent bloody fasting. But we can all be activists when we every day by choosing where we eat, what we eat, and where that food comes from. Like the invitation is to treat food as sacred again. Come back into reconnection with what that is, where it comes from. That's going to be the byproduct of what is an awareness campaign about agrochemicals. It will allow people to come back into communion and think differently about where their food comes from. And what happens then? They eat better food, they have healthier outcomes. We support those farmers that are doing incredible work. We start to change the market and the demand for nutrient dense food that come from people that are nurturing and stewarding their farms and their animals. So it all integrates together and it's all part of a movement. And we're just happy that this is where how we're playing a role at this time on Earth.
100%. I do want to open it up for some questions, but before I do that, I just want to share that this is literally just the beginning. The first episode launched today. I put it in the chat, but we're going to be launching an episode every Tuesday until the new year, January 6th, potentially even longer, depending on if we end up adding another episode or one or two. Stay tuned there.
3 or 4.
So this is a episode series now launching every Tuesday anywhere you get your podcast. I'll throw the link into the chat right now. You can get all the information. We're going to be launching that resource guide for you to share far and wide, friends, family, loved ones on the 13th of November. And ultimately, this is a fundraising campaign for a future campaign that we're hoping to do that will really crack open the echo chamber that is the food system and reach people who literally have never heard of glyphosate. We're going to have a call specific to that campaign. That's just why we didn't get into all the nitty gritty here. So next month in November, we're going to have a call where we share more context about what is the campaign, what is the strategy behind that, what are we hoping to do. just so that you can be aware there. But if you do have the capacity to support, I know that times are tough in the United States and abroad, but any dollar, we're literally an organization funded by individuals who just are passionate about reforming the food system, and we're incredibly grateful for that. So every donation gets put to a good use. So with that, if you have any questions, I know there were some that were in the chat throughout the conversation. You can put them into the chat. You can also raise your hand and come off mute if you're inspired to share directly. Yeah. And if there's not any questions, Blair, we can, if we have any closing thoughts, we can wrap it there, but want to give the opportunity in case anyone's burning. I love that poster, by the way, Shannon, that you shared in the chat.
Oh, where's the poster? I want to look at that.
Well, it's the copy from the poster that she had from her farmer's market about,
Oh, yes.
yeah.
Yeah, the carrots, I just mentioned that. There should be, instead of organic certification, there should be anything that's non-organic should have to list the chemicals that was used in the production process.
Yeah.
Like
Oh,
that, I
that's,
mean, yeah.
go ahead. Go
No,
ahead.
no, they go.
Speaking of posters, one part of this that I did want to share is as part of the campaign, we're still finalizing the design. We're doing a contest for it, but we'll have a T-shirt offering that is essentially serving. If you donate $75 more, you'll get a free T-shirt. That's essentially supposed to act as just a conversation starter, similar to this poster that you see, similar to the one that we referenced earlier. That was like, "I'm not a farmer and I'm not trying to kill you." Could we create a shirt that when you're wearing it at the grocery store or if you're at the park, someone might see it, stop and be like, "What does your shirt mean?" And then you can have a conversation like, "Oh, are you aware of what's in our food system? You should listen to this podcast series," because really it's startling how many people just this is not crossing their sphere. My friend group always has a running joke of whenever I go to a party, how long it takes for me to bring up the food system in casual conversation because they're like, "Oh, it was only 15 minutes." And Mel's asking anyone if they know about regenerative agriculture. Because so many people don't know. So that's another part of the campaign is really just trying to get the word out. But with that in mind, it doesn't seem like we have any burning questions right now. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. Really, it means the world to us that you are here for this conversation, that you're tuning into the podcast, and ideally, I'll have your homework. Share this with your friends, your family. Forward the email to people you talk about. Share it with your colleagues at work. Really, it's word of mouth and the grassroots effort that gets this message out. We're doing all we can, but the support from people who are in this and believe in this really do a lot of the heavy lifting. So thank you for that. Blair, do you have anything you want to leave us with?
Of course. I just again thank you guys for showing up today. It means a lot for us. We put a lot of energy and time into this work, and we're very passionate about it. And to see that there's a whole bunch of people that are that interested to join us today gives us another injection of energy and possibility. And I think what's come of having these conversations with these incredible people throughout the podcast that have been working quite a lot in isolation, we've realized that if we want to see the change that's possible, which I think we all know, we can all feel what we need to do and we can feel what our human potential is. It's We're not going to do it alone, and it's going to take us to make the changes that we want to see within our food system, within all of our human experience. So this is the invitation. Here we go. Buckle up, and we look forward to more. And I know for one thing, it's this team will not stop. And I'm really blessed to be working with such incredible humans with diverse skill sets. And, I'm one of the luckiest men alive. I get to do amazing stuff every day. And my purpose and passion have been fused together. And I get to do it with these amazing humans. So thank you guys for supporting us on this mission. It means a lot. And, power to you all.
Giving them a shout out just to put the names. We have Briar Rose, who's in New Zealand. She's on this call. We have Alana. She's in Mexico. She's on this call. We have Elle. She's in Australia. She's on this call. We obviously have Blair, myself, and then we have Dave, who is also in Australia. So that's the team behind this work. Um, People really passionate about the food system. So we're really happy to be walking alongside you, and we're grateful you're here. And yeah, let's do it. All right, guys, thank you. Tune into the podcast today. You can get it anywhere you get your podcast every Tuesday. They're launching. Hope you tune in and share far and
Mm.
wide. Thanks,
And
everyone.
if you've got any people that want to talk about this topic or other podcasts or whatever, I am here and ready and willing.
Name of the podcast is The Invisible Ingredient. I just put the link in the chat so you can go to our website, check out all that we're doing, and then you can get the direct link to the podcast on Apple, Spotify. Yep, it's on Spotify, wherever you want to listen to it. Awesome,
Thank you
guys. Thank
all.
you so much. Have a fantastic rest of your day.